The ocean stretched endlessly before us, shimmering under the golden sun, the sound of waves crashing against the shore filling the air with a peaceful rhythm. It was supposed to be the perfect getaway, a much-needed break from routine, a chance to reconnect with Daniel. We had joined our closest friends, 2 other couples, for a week at a luxurious beachside villa. Everything was planned to perfection: private pools, candlelit dinners, late-night bonfires on the sand. From the outside, it looked like paradise. But I didn't know then that this trip would change everything. On the first day, everything felt easy, light. Laughter echoed through the villa as we sipped cocktails by the pool, the tension of our everyday lives melting away. Daniel was relaxed, happier than I had seen him in months. Work had consumed him lately, and I had felt the distance between us growing. This trip was supposed to fix that. But then there was him, Liam. He was one of Daniel's best friends, married to Olivia, one of my closest friends. We had known each other for years, always in the same social circles, always friendly, but never anything more. Until now. I don't know when I started noticing the way he looked at me. Or maybe I had noticed before, and this was the first time I let myself acknowledge it. A lingering glance across the dinner table, a casual brush of his hand against mine when passing me a drink.
By the way, if you're curious about what happened next, subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Thank you.
It was subtle, unspoken, but undeniable. I told myself it was nothing, a harmless spark, a side effect of the vacation air, of too much wine and sun-kissed skin. But as the days passed, the tension between us grew, crackling like static electricity in the air. And then, on the third night, everything changed. The night had started like the others, drinks by the beach, the sound of the ocean blending with the low hum of conversation. Olivia had gone to bed early, exhausted from the day in the sun. Daniel was deep in conversation with the other couple, talking about work, real estate, and things I had stopped paying attention to. I felt restless, the warm night air heavy on my skin. That's when I felt Liam's eyes on me again. I turned to him, and for the first time I didn't look away. We wandered toward the water, leaving the others behind. The beach was quiet, the sand cool beneath our feet. We didn't speak at first, just walked along the shore, the tension between us stretching thin like a thread ready to snap. Finally, he stopped, turning to face me, his gaze dark and unreadable. "This feels different, doesn't it?" His voice was low, barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering. "Liam, we can't." But before I could finish, his hand brushed against mine, sending a shiver through me. "Then why does it feel like we already have?" he murmured. I should have walked away. I should have said something to stop whatever was about to happen, but I didn't. The waves crashed behind us, the night wrapped around us, and in that moment everything else faded away. And then he kissed me. The moment our lips met, every rational thought I had vanished. It was wrong, I knew that. But his hands were on my waist, pulling me closer, and for the first time in months I felt wanted. Desired. My breath hitched as his fingers traced my jawline, his touch both hesitant and electric, like he knew we were crossing a line but couldn't bring himself to stop. The kiss deepened, and for a few seconds I let myself get lost in it. But then reality slammed back into me like a tidal wave. I pulled away abruptly, my chest rising and falling in short, uneven breaths. "Liam, we can't do this." His eyes searched mine, full of something I couldn't decipher. "Tell me you don't feel this too." I swallowed hard, shaking my head, even though we both knew the lie in my words. "It doesn't matter, this isn't right." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair, stepping back just enough to put space between us. "I know, but that doesn't make it go away." I turned quickly, walking back toward the villa, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I didn't stop, didn't look back, even though I felt his eyes on me the whole way. When I stepped inside, the warmth of the villa felt suffocating. Daniel sat at the kitchen counter, laughing at something on his phone, completely unaware that his wife had just betrayed him. I forced a smile, my skin still burning from Liam's touch. "I'm going to bed." Daniel looked up, his expression soft. "Tired already? Come here for a sec." I hesitated but walked over. He wrapped his arms around my waist, pulling me close, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "Love you, babe. This trip has been amazing so far. I feel like I have you back." A sharp pang of guilt sliced through me, so strong I thought I might break right there in his arms. I swallowed it down, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I love you too." Then I turned and walked upstairs, feeling more lost than ever. The next morning, I woke up with the weight of last night pressing against my chest like a stone. The sound of waves crashing outside the villa should have been soothing, but instead, it only heightened the suffocating guilt wrapped around me. Daniel was still asleep beside me, his breathing deep and even, completely oblivious to the fact that his wife had nearly thrown everything away under the cover of darkness. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to will away the memory of Liam's hands on me, the heat of his breath against my skin, the way my body had betrayed everything I was supposed to stand for. I needed to act normal, pretend nothing had happened, so I forced myself to move, slipping out of bed carefully so as not to wake Daniel. I padded downstairs to the kitchen, hoping a cup of coffee and some fresh air would help clear my mind. But as soon as I stepped onto the patio, I froze. Liam was already there, leaning against the wooden railing, staring out at the endless blue horizon. For a split second, I considered turning back, pretending I hadn't seen him, but then his gaze flickered to mine, and it was too late. "Hey," he said, his voice quieter than usual. There was no teasing smirk, no easy charm, just exhaustion. I swallowed hard, gripping the mug in my hands like a lifeline. Morning. Silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. I should have just walked away, but instead, I found myself standing there, caught between the person I had been before last night and the person I was now. Finally, Liam exhaled and ran a hand through his hair. I couldn't sleep. Me neither, I admitted before I could stop myself. His jaw tensed. "Julie, about last night." "It was a mistake," I cut in quickly, desperate to stop whatever he was about to say. "It can't happen again." He studied me for a moment, and I hated how easily he could see through me. "You sure about that?" I was, but I nodded anyway. "Yes." Another pause, then he nodded, looking back toward the ocean. "Right." I wanted him to argue. I wanted him to tell me that I wasn't crazy, that what we felt was real, but he didn't, and somehow that hurt more. Footsteps sounded behind me, and I turned to see Olivia stepping onto the patio, stretching as she yawned. "Morning, guys, have you seen Daniel?" I forced a smile, still sleeping. She grinned. "Lucky, Liam kept me up all night tossing and turning." My stomach twisted. He hadn't been restless because of her, he had been restless because of me. Liam cleared his throat. "I was thinking we should go out on the boat today, make a day of it." Olivia clapped her hands together. "Yes, that sounds perfect." I nodded along, pretending to be as excited as she was. But as we all sat down to breakfast a little while later, I felt Liam's gaze on me, and I knew this wasn't over, not even close. The boat ride was supposed to be fun, but for me it was torture. Every time Daniel put his arm around me, every time he laughed or kissed my cheek, the guilt inside me grew heavier, weighing me down like an anchor. Liam barely spoke to me, keeping his distance, but I could feel the tension radiating off him in waves. Olivia, blissfully unaware, leaned against him as the boat rocked gently on the waves, a bright smile on her face. She looked happy, content. And I hated myself for being the reason that might change. As the afternoon wore on, we docked near a secluded cove, the water clear and inviting. Everyone jumped in, splashing and laughing, and for a little while, I let myself pretend that everything was normal, that I hadn't nearly destroyed my marriage last night, that I wasn't still thinking about Liam every time I closed my eyes. But then, as I climbed back onto the boat, Liam was there, holding out a towel. Our fingers brushed, and the jolt of electricity that shot through me nearly made me drop it. I looked up at him, and for a moment, neither of us moved. "Julie," he murmured so quietly that no one else could hear. I shook my head. "Don't." He exhaled sharply and took a step back, nodding once before walking away. I watched him go, my heart pounding, knowing that I was losing control. And the worst part, I wasn't sure I wanted to stop it. The tension between Liam and me didn't fade. If anything, it thickened, wrapping around us like a vice, squeezing tighter with each passing moment. I tried to ignore it, to focus on Daniel, on the vacation we were supposed to be enjoying. But no matter how hard I tried, I kept catching myself glancing in Liam's direction, feeling his gaze on me when he thought no one was watching. That night, after dinner, we all gathered on the beach for drinks by the bonfire. The air was warm, the ocean breeze carrying the scent of salt and burning wood. Olivia curled up against Liam's side, and Daniel sat next to me, his arm draped over my shoulders. From the outside, we looked like four happy couples, basking in the glow of a perfect vacation. But beneath the surface, I was drowning. Liam and I hadn't spoken much since the boat ride, but the silence between us felt louder than words. Every time his hand brushed against Olivia's, something inside me twisted painfully. And when Daniel leaned in to kiss my temple, whispering how much he loved this trip, I nearly crumbled under the weight of my own betrayal. "We should play a game," Olivia announced, breaking the silence. "Something fun." "Like what?" Daniel asked, sipping his beer. She grinned. "Truth or dare?" I tensed. A ridiculous game, childish, harmless. But in this moment, it felt dangerous. The bottle was passed around, each turn bringing harmless confessions and silly dares. "What's the most embarrassing thing you've ever done?" Sing the chorus of the first song that pops into your head. It was all laughter and lighthearted teasing until the bottle landed on Liam. "Truth or dare?" Olivia asked playfully. Liam's eyes flickered to mine for the briefest second before he smirked. "Truth," Olivia thought for a moment. "Okay, if you could kiss anyone here aside from me, obviously, who would it be?" My breath caught. My fingers dug into the sand, heart hammering against my ribs. It was a joke, a stupid question meant to be laughed off. But Liam didn't laugh. He hesitated. It was brief, almost unnoticeable, but I saw it. And in that fraction of a second, before he covered it up with a smirk and some offhand remark about how he was too smart to answer that, I knew. He was thinking about me. I needed to get out of there. "I'm going to get more wine," I mumbled, standing up too quickly. No one questioned it. No one noticed except for Liam. I walked toward the villa, my mind racing. This was spiraling out of control. I needed space. I needed Julie. His voice stopped me in my tracks. I turned, finding Liam standing a few feet away, his hands shoved in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "What are you doing?" I whispered. "I don't know." He took a step closer. "But I can't stop, can you?" I should have said yes. I should have walked away. But instead I stood there, my pulse racing, my breath shallow. "Liam, this is wrong." "I know, but that doesn't change anything." Silence stretched between us, charged and dangerous. My fingers trembled as I held my glass of wine, my body torn between running back to Daniel and stepping forward into something I wasn't sure I could come back from. Then from the beach, Olivia's laughter rang out, followed by Daniel calling my name. Reality crashed into me like a tidal wave. I turned abruptly and walked away, leaving Liam standing in the moonlight, watching me go. But even as I rejoined my husband, as I sat beside him and let him pull me into his warmth, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had already made my choice. That night, I lay awake beside Daniel, staring at the ceiling as his steady breathing filled the silence. My body felt restless, my mind trapped in a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't control. I told myself it was over, that I had stopped it before anything irreversible happened. But deep down, I knew better. I knew that one moment of restraint didn't erase the storm raging inside me. I knew that whatever was happening between Liam and me wasn't going to fade just because I wanted it to. And I knew that eventually, one of us would break. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of waves crashing against the shore, but the tranquility of the ocean did nothing to calm the storm raging inside me. Daniel was still asleep beside me, his breathing even, his face peaceful. I envied him. I wished I could close my eyes and wake up as if nothing had changed. But something had, and no amount of pretending would undo it. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and padded down to the kitchen, hoping a cup of coffee would clear my head. But as soon as I stepped onto the patio, my heart sank. Liam was there, leaning against the railing, staring out at the horizon. He must have heard me because he turned slightly, his eyes meeting mine. There was no smirk this time, no teasing remark, just silence. I should have turned around, I should have walked away. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped forward, my fingers tightening around the warm ceramic of my mug. "Morning." "Morning," he said quietly, his voice rougher than usual. "Did you sleep?" I hesitated, not really. He nodded, looking back toward the ocean. "Me neither." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of everything unspoken hung between us, pressing down like the humid air before a storm. I wanted to tell him that last night was a mistake, that whatever had sparked between us had to die here, before it consumed everything. But I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Liam turned to face me fully. "Julie, this isn't just in my head, is it?" I inhaled sharply, my pulse spiking. "Liam, just tell me the truth." I squeezed my eyes shut, shaking my head, It doesn't matter. It does to me. His voice was steady, but there was something in his expression, something raw, something vulnerable, that made my chest ache. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the sound of footsteps behind us made me snap my lips shut. Olivia's voice rang out before I even turned around. "Oh, hey, I didn't realize you two were up." I stepped back instinctively, putting distance between Liam and myself as Olivia walked onto the patio, stretching her arms above her head. God, I slept like a rock. Did you guys eat yet? I'm starving. Not yet, Liam answered smoothly, slipping back into the effortless mask he always wore. I was just enjoying the view. Olivia kissed his cheek and turned to me with a grin. Daniel still out. I forced a smile. Yeah, he was tired. Well, let's wake them up. I say we do a little exploring today. Maybe rent some bikes, ride down the coast. Liam nodded, stepping away from the railing. Sounds like a plan. I stayed silent, watching as he and Olivia disappeared back into the villa. My hands were still trembling, my breath uneven. This had to stop. I couldn't keep playing with fire and pretending I wasn't going to get burned. The day passed in a blur of forced laughter and carefully measured distance. We biked along the shoreline, stopped for lunch at a small beachside cafe, and even took pictures like we were all just happy couples on a perfect vacation. Daniel held my hand, kissed my cheek, whispered in my ear about how much he was loving this trip. And I smiled, nodded, played my part flawlessly. But every time I glanced at Liam, I saw the same torment reflected in his eyes. A storm waiting to break. That night, I tried to avoid him. I stuck close to Daniel, let Olivia take control of the conversation at dinner, laughed at the right moments, did everything I could to keep the balance from tipping. But it didn't matter. Because later, when I went outside to get some air, I found Liam waiting for me in the shadows of the villa's balcony. Julie, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I stood there, staring at him, my heart pounding. Tell me to stop, he said, stepping closer. Tell me to let this go. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't over, not even close. The tension had become unbearable. No matter how much I tried to act normal, no matter how much I focused on Daniel, I felt Liam's presence like gravity, pulling me towards something I had no control over. I had spent the day avoiding him, smiling through meals, pretending everything was fine. But it was. That night, after another long dinner filled with laughter that didn't feel real, I slipped away from the group. The villa was quiet, the ocean air thick with humidity. I wandered toward the pool, needing a moment alone, needing space to breathe. But I wasn't alone. Liam was there, waiting. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there watching me. My pulse quickened, my chest tightening as I looked around, making sure no one else was nearby. Liam, we can't. Don't say it, he cut in, his voice low, firm. Don't tell me this isn't happening, we both know it is. I swallowed hard. It's wrong. Then why are you here? He asked, stepping closer. Why do you keep looking at me the way I look at you? Why do you run when I get too close but never far enough? He was right. And I hated that he was right. My hands trembled and I gripped the edge of the lounge chair behind me to steady myself. Liam, please. He was in front of me now, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. Tell me to walk away. Tell me you don't want this, and I swear to God, I will. I opened my mouth. The words wouldn't come. His fingers brushed against mine, hesitant, as if waiting for me to pull away. I didn't. The moment stretched between us, fragile and dangerous. And then he kissed me. This time I didn't stop it. His hands tangled in my hair, my body pressed against his, and for a few breathless moments nothing else existed. Not Daniel, not Olivia, not the consequences that would inevitably come. Just this, just us. Then footsteps, voices in the distance. Reality crashed back, slamming into me like a wave. I tore myself away from him, chest heaving, panic rising. We have to stop. Liam's jaw clenched, his breath unsteady. Julie. No, this can't happen again. I shook my head, stepping back, putting space between us. I can't do this. A flicker of something hurt, frustration crossed his face, but he nodded. Fine. I turned and walked away, back toward the villa, back toward my husband. My heart was racing, my skin still burning where Liam had touched me. I climbed into bed beside Daniel, feeling his warmth, hearing his steady breathing, and I knew I had just done something I could never take back. And worst of all, I wasn't sure I regretted it. The guilt settled in my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. I told myself it was a moment of weakness, a mistake I could forget, but the truth clung to me like the humid air. I avoided Liam the next morning, making sure to stay close to Daniel to keep Olivia between us whenever possible. But every time I caught his gaze from across the villa, I felt it all over again. The rush, the fear, the undeniable pull between us. Daniel was in a great mood, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. "I was thinking we could go snorkeling today," he said over breakfast, his hand resting lightly on my thigh. "Spend the afternoon out on the reef, just us." I forced a smile. "That sounds perfect." Liam sat across from us, his jaw tightening as he stabbed at his food. Olivia chatted beside him, excited about the day's plans, completely unaware of the tension suffocating the space between her husband and me. I could feel the way Liam was avoiding my eyes now, the same way I was avoiding his. But it didn't matter. What happened last night was real, and no amount of pretending could change that. We spent the afternoon on the water, but I barely registered any of it. Daniel held me close as we swam, kissed me in the sunlight, whispered about how happy he was. I nodded, laughed, played the role of the devoted wife, all while my stomach twisted itself into knots. I could still feel Liam's hands on me, still taste the kiss I should never have let happen. And worst of all, part of me wanted more. That night, I told Daniel I was tired and went to bed early, but sleep never came. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts a tangled mess. Then my phone buzzed. My heart lurched as I reached for it, knowing who it would be before I even looked. "Liam's meet me now." I should have ignored it. I should have turned off my phone and stayed in bed beside my husband. But I didn't. Slipping out of bed, I moved carefully, making sure Daniel stayed asleep. The villa was quiet, the others already in their rooms. I stepped outside, my pulse hammering, and found Liam waiting for me near the pool. His expression was unreadable, his posture tense. "Julie," he said, his voice low, rough. "I need to know something." I swallowed hard. "Liam, we can't." "Just answer me," he interrupted. "Do you regret it?" I hesitated. The answer should have been simple. Yes, I should regret it more than anything. But that wasn't the truth, and we both knew it. "I don't know," I whispered. His eyes darkened. "That's not good enough." "What do you want me to say?" My voice shook. "That I regret wanting you, that I regret the way you make me feel, because I can't lie to you, Liam, but I also can't do this." He exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through his hair. "Then tell me how I'm supposed to stop. Tell me how I'm supposed to pretend that this isn't happening when every time I see you, I..." Footsteps, a door creaking open. My stomach dropped as we both turned toward the villa, toward the figure standing in the doorway. Daniel, his expression was unreadable, his eyes moving between us, taking in the distance, the tension, the way we were standing too close despite everything. My blood ran cold. "Julie," his voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, something sharp, something dangerous. "What's going on?" Panic clawed at my throat. Liam said nothing, his jaw clenched so tight I thought he might break. This was it, the moment everything came crashing down. Daniel's eyes flickered between me and Liam, his expression unreadable, but I could see it happening, the pieces falling into place. The tension in the air, the way I stood frozen, the guilt I couldn't hide fast enough. My breath hitched as I forced myself to speak. "I couldn't sleep," I said, my voice too thin, too weak. "I just came outside for some air." Daniel's gaze hardened, and he just happened to be here too. Liam didn't move, he didn't speak, his silence was damning. I could feel the way his body was tensed beside me, every muscle locked in place. My heartbeat pounded so loudly I was sure it echoed in the still night air. I needed to fix this. "Daniel, please." "How long?" His voice was eerily calm, but I knew that was worse. Anger was one thing, but the quiet, the control, this was something else entirely. "How long have you been lying to me?" "Nothing happened," I blurted, stepping forward. "I swear I would never." Liam let out a breath, sharp and bitter, and suddenly it was too much. Daniel's jaw tightened, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "You won't even deny it, will you?" His voice cracked, and for the first time I saw the hurt beneath his fury, the betrayal settling deep into his bones. "Jesus, Julie." Tears burned in my eyes. Daniel, I love you. He let out a hollow laugh. Do you? Because the way I see it, you've been making a fool out of me this entire trip. Hell, who knows how long before that. Liam finally spoke. It wasn't supposed to happen. Daniel's head snapped toward him, his entire body coiling. Shut up, just shut the hell up. You, he shook his head, his hands trembling. You're my best friend, Liam, and you did this to me. Liam stepped forward, but Daniel held up a hand. No, don't. I swear to God if you say another word. Daniel, I reached for him, but he jerked back like I had burned him. Don't touch me, he spat. Don't you dare. The air between us thickened, so suffocating I could barely breathe. Olivia. My mind spun wildly. Olivia was still inside, asleep, oblivious to the fact that her marriage was just as much on the verge of collapse as mine. I felt sick. Daniel exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face. I need to get out of here. Panic surged in my chest. Daniel, please don't leave. He turned his back on me, walking away before I could stop him. I wanted to run after him, to beg him to listen, but my legs wouldn't move. I stood there, frozen, watching as my husband disappeared into the night. And just like that, I knew. I had lost him. The villa was eerily silent the next morning. Daniel hadn't returned. I had spent the night curled up in bed, staring at the door, hoping, praying he would walk back in. But he didn't. When I finally dragged myself out of the room, my stomach twisted with dread. Olivia was sipping coffee on the patio, scrolling through her phone, blissfully unaware of the chaos that had unraveled just hours ago. But Liam, he was standing by the railing, his face pale, his hands gripping the wood so tightly his knuckles were white. He turned when he saw me, and I knew we were both thinking the same thing. Where was Daniel? I barely made it to the kitchen before my hands started shaking. I needed to call him. I needed to fix this. But just as I reached for my phone, the door swung open. Daniel! My heart stopped. He looked exhausted, his clothes rumpled, his eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept. He didn't even glance at Liam, didn't acknowledge Olivia's casual greeting. He just stared at me, something hollow and unfamiliar in his gaze. Pack your things, we're leaving. The words were a punch to the gut. Daniel. Now Julie. His voice was flat, final. I swallowed hard, my throat burning. Olivia glanced between us, her brows knitting together. Wait, what's going on? Her confusion cut through the thick tension in the room. Why are you leaving early? Liam shifted beside her, silent. I could see the panic creeping into his expression now too. Daniel exhaled sharply, rubbing his temple. Ask your husband. The world tilted. Olivia laughed, a nervous, confused sound. What, Liam, what's he talking about? Liam looked at me, then at Daniel. He wasn't going to say it. He wouldn't be the one to break her world apart, but Daniel had no such restraint. Julie and Liam have been sneaking around behind our backs. Isn't that right? His voice was calm, but I heard the fury simmering beneath it, the deep, bone-cutting betrayal. The air was sucked out of the room. Olivia turned to me, then to Liam, searching our faces for a denial that wasn't coming. No, she shook her head, stepping back. That's not Liam, tell me that's not true. Liam opened his mouth, but no words came out. And that was all the answer she needed. Olivia's face twisted, her breath hitching, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God. Daniel didn't look at me again. He just walked past, grabbed his bag, and disappeared out the door. And this time, I knew he wasn't coming back. The next few minutes were chaos. Olivia was screaming, her voice raw with betrayal. How could you do this? How could you? I couldn't answer her. I couldn't even move. I stood there as Liam tried to speak, tried to reach for her, but she shoved him away. Don't touch me, she turned to me then, her eyes blazing. And you, she choked out a bitter laugh. You were supposed to be my friend. Tears blurred my vision, my hands shaking. Olivia, I. Save it, her voice cracked. Just save it. I wanted to tell her it hadn't meant anything. I wanted to tell her I hadn't meant to ruin everything. But none of that mattered now. I left without another word. Daniel didn't speak the entire drive to the airport. I tried over and over, but he just stared straight ahead, gripping the wheel so hard I thought it might break. When we finally reached the terminal, he got out, grabbed his bag, and turned to me one last time. Don't come home. My stomach dropped. Daniel, please. I don't want to see you again, Julie. His voice was cold, empty. It's over. And with that, he walked away, leaving me standing there in the middle of a crowded airport, my marriage in ruins, my life shattered. I had lost everything, and I had no one to blame but myself.
Thank you for watching the video. If you want to hear more stories, subscribe to the channel and like the video. Videos are released every day. Good luck to everyone.